All right. Well, good morning, everybody. If possible, and you have the ability to do so, please get on video so we can see each other's beautiful faces this morning. It is so good to see you all. I know we'll have some people trickling in, but to respect your time, I know we're all busy. I just wanted to get started. For those who don't know me, my name is Alison Davis. I am a professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics, and I am the executive director of CEDIK, which is the Community and Economic Development Initiative of Kentucky. We are a research and engagement center housed within the College of Ag and have a very strong relationship with Cooperative Extension. And so I thought today, it would be a great time just to sort of do an overview of what economic development is. I promise I will try to keep the PowerPoint slides to a minimum, but I know that's what we're kind of all used to in today's Zoom world. So I hope you all are doing well. It is pouring down rain here and really miserable, so I just need to see your bright, shiny faces to make this day better. I do have two of my colleagues on with me, Melody Nall. Melody, wave so you can draw attention to the screen. Okay, there she is. Melody is our engagement director for CEDIK. Many of you know her, and then many of you have seen and talked to Sarah Boker. Sarah, will you wave? Okay, and Sarah is our communications director for CEDIK. So very thankful that they are here to join us today in case something goes awry, and so that they can provide lots of great feedback and input as well. So I'm going to get started. And this is the first time I've done this with just one screen. So hopefully that'll actually make it easier. And then move that little thing out of the way. Slideshow. So hopefully you all can see the PowerPoint. I've introduced myself. Today, it's gonna go by quickly. It's just an hour. I don't plan on talking for a full hour. I'd love to have as much time for questions as possible. But I just wanna go through some basic definitions. And I know Sarah sent you in the email with the link to the Zoom, she had sent you some great resources that the CEDIK team pulled together, just doing some kind of basics about economic development. So we're just going to cover some basic definitions. We're going to talk about different economic development strategies, the potential role of extension, and then just reintroduce you or introduce you for the first time to some of CEDIK's programs. Hopefully you all know a little bit about who we are. We really work closely with the program areas to provide programming for extension. And we also work very closely with communities, with elected officials, with economic development professionals, with hospitals, all towards our vision of engaged communities and vibrant economies. So I'm going to start here. I don't know how many of you have used a Menti poll before, but let me stop this for 1 second. And I want to show you a Menti poll. If you guys have ever used this before, it's a great, it is a great tool to use for Zooms or where you're trying to get a fair amount of feedback quickly. And it's really simple. So you can just go to menti.com. And then there's the code at the top, 955-4879. And you can do this to get, multiple choice questions. We can do it to get some kind of, text feedback. And we're going to do 2 examples using this. I was exposed to Menti. It's Mentimeter is the name of the program. And I just thought it was great. It provides really quick feedback. It's fairly easy to use and fairly unburdensome to the participants. So what is your current degree of comfort of doing, and I put in quotes, economic development in your community? And sorry, I kept trying that familiar to be on the second line, but it just refused. All right, so we've got about 5 folks. So I'm gonna give you some time to get acquainted with the system. We're going to use this one more time, so don't close out if you can. All right, give it just a few more moments. Looks like we've got a lot of folks who are in that somewhat familiar. We've got 2 very familiars. I'd love to know who those are. because maybe they want to help us out. So we've got anyone else going once, going twice. We've got about 10 people that responded. Awesome. So hopefully what I'll do today is just provide you some additional information that might help you think about economic development in your community. And I'm sorry, I'm going to keep switching back between these two things. So we did that. So I just want to go through what the definition of economic development is. And it is the creation of wealth from which community benefits are realized. It is more than a jobs program. It's an investment in growing your economy and enhancing the prosperity and quality of life for all residents. There are lots of different definitions. I prefer one that reads similar to this, where it's more than a jobs program. And economic development means very different things to different people. So I think this is fairly clear, but I think it's important to really understand why we do economic development. And to me, it has three main purposes. The first is to give a greater number of people greater access to wealth. Let's make sure I'm not missing any chat box. Okay, good. Sarah or Melody, if I'm missing a question, just pop in and say something just so I can. I'm not looking at the chat box right now. So in essence, we're trying to give more people greater wealth by some type of personal economic growth, right? It's not a handout, it's an opportunity for them to earn income. The second is that we want to increase the tax base of communities. And we saw this during COVID, that when fewer people are working or fewer businesses are in operation, it's going to have an immediate impact on the tax base, which means it will have an immediate impact on the ability of local government to provide necessary services to citizens. And the last is to diversify the economic base and thereby cushion the community against economic shocks. And, Kentucky and for sure is a great example of why this is important. And when we look across the landscape of the state, we know that, Eastern Kentucky put a lot of its eggs in the coal basket. We had a lot of communities that relied heavily on manufacturing or textiles. And those communities that were not able to diversify will have a much harder time responding to shocks that affect those industry. So when COVID hit, and a lot of our rural places are very much reliant on services, particularly retail, restaurants, tourism. When COVID hit and that was their predominant economic base, then there's really nothing else for folks to fall back on. So it makes it very difficult to respond. One thing about Lexington, which is where UK is located, the city of Lexington or Fayette County is one of the most diverse economies I have ever seen. It is the most beautiful pie chart when you look at all the different types of industries in the city, and there's really not a single industry that city is reliant on. And so when we hear stories of like Lexmark continuing to downsize, it's okay because we have been able to rely on our other industries to kind of offset those impacts. So we want to grow wealth, we want to have a strong tax base, and we want to be resilient. So we're going to one more Menti, and I promise I won't do it again, but I just wanted you to see what it looked like when we do it as an open text. And I think this question is important. So because it'll help us understand how we work with our partners. And I'm going to go right here and go to this one. So what do you think economic developers do on a daily basis? Think about if you have a paid economic developer in your county, what do you think they do? Or whoever is charged with economic development, what are their activities? And remember, go to menti.com and use this code and let me know if you're having any issues with it. Talk with businesses interested in locating in the area. Perfect. That's the kind of answer I'm looking for. Work to bring in business. Perfect. Look at you guys go. Okay. Awesome. This is great. Okay, so if I were to, and you please keep adding, I think this is really useful for me to see as well as others. If I were to quickly sort of summarize what I see is that you all think that economic developers are largely responsible for attracting new industry in. And they do that by sort of advertising the strengths of the community, looking at current data and marketing local businesses. And I do I see here build partnerships, meet with businesses in the area to learn their situation, workforce development, being a connector. These are all really good examples of what economic developers do. Not all of them do all of it, but this is sort of a good job description. I would say that workforce development maybe 10, 15 years ago was not really on the radar of economic developers, but as it has become the #1 need in communities, it has become a very important part of an economic developer's job, either to connect with workforce development providers or to figure out how to strengthen on their own. All right, so I promise that was my last Menti poll, but hopefully you guys can see it's a very, and I'm gonna show you another cool tool I use, but I just think it's a great way to get some quick feedback. Okay, so we'll keep going on here. And anytime you guys, have any questions or comments, stop me and we'll have, I think, plenty of time to chat. All right. Okay, so when I think of, and I think I heard this, is what do we typically think of when we say economic development? And for me, this is how particularly in the state of Kentucky, we think of economic development. And there's sort of just a resounding theme, which is a bunch of people with a ribbon or a shovel. They're typically very kind of older aged, typically white, typically male, who are getting ready to cut a ribbon, sometimes in front of a road, sometimes in front of a field, other times in front of a cornfield. So, they're trying to identify new properties and new buildings, new parcels that can be used to then attract industry into an area. Very seldomly, and I wish more so, would you see them kind of actively working with existing industry or working with individuals around entrepreneurs. But for the most part, economic development is really about this idea of attracting industry in. And I argue that it is actually the least important of things we should be doing, but I'll tell you why they focus on it. So this going on with economic development definitions, there are two types of jobs. There are the sexy jobs, and then there are the unsexy jobs. And the sexy jobs, AKA primary jobs, are those that are kind of thought of as export income jobs. And so what that means is that this is a job that when that individual works, they are producing something that attracts money from outside of the community into the community. So we often think of, it could be coal, it could be manufacturing, and it actually could be healthcare, but they're producing something and sending it out of the region and new money is coming in. So it's a very sexy job, right? That's what we all want, is to be able to produce things that go out and we create a new kind of churn of money. The less sexy job is what we call secondary employer. And those are the types of businesses and industries that support the needs of the local community. So they would be our restaurants, they would be our retailers, they would be, construction or transportation, arts and cultural industries, and so forth. They tend to be a little bit lower on the wage scale, again, because of the customer base that they're serving. But they are, and there is not the typical type of job that we're trying to attract into a community, but incredibly important for creating a place where people want to live. Did I lose everybody on video? No, thank you. Anne, thank you. Hi, Sarah. You guys are the best. Okay, fine. I'm not going to look at your faces, but I miss you all, and that's all that matters. Okay. Thank you, Christy, for coming back on. All right. So, and if there are any questions about this, and I think you guys, this is fairly intuitive. So economic developers typically focus on the top job, chambers and main streets and, nonprofits and whatnot will typically focus more on the secondary employers. Okay. So, the idea here is that we've talked, we showed those pictures. You all said that economic developers are really focused on this idea of attraction. But there are so many different components to economic development. And so hopefully as you kind of look through this list, you might start to think about how extension could play a role in sort of thinking about economic development. We know infrastructure is critical. We hear a lot about roads. Broadband is not on here specifically, but we consider broadband a type of infrastructure. Roads, wastewater, water quality. I guess transportation's on there twice. So I felt really important about it. Energy, the different markets, workforce, the idea of public spaces, community, sustainability, and resilience, thinking about the different types of economies, the knowledge economy, which is really where a lot of research and innovation stems from, to the service economy, which is supporting the local community. So lots of different components here, not just sort of infrastructure, which is a lot of what we see kind of in the newspapers. So if you did not know, I wanted to just give you a little idea of how economic development is organized within the state. So we have the Cabinet for Economic Development. They call themselves Team Kentucky. And I think I have this open. I just wanted you to see a little bit. Oopsie. Share screen. Just wanted you to see a little bit. So the Cabinet for Economic Development is really charged with bringing in new industry. They have offices in Europe, in Canada, and other places as ways to be that liaison with new industry so that we can be competitive with other states. So on their website, they were also charged with creating the supply chain for PPE during COVID, which was something they were not quite accustomed to, but working with manufacturers to make sure stuff was coming through. There are some pretty good resources here for you all to look at when you have time. One is, available sites and buildings. I think it's important that everyone knows what is being marketed out there. You just never know who's coming in or what their questions might be, but this gives you access to what's called Zoom Prospector. It'll show you all sites and buildings, and you'll see how your community is being marketed, and I think that's important. You'll see here, things about starting, growing your own business. You'll see different types of workforce programs. I think there's also something down here, this search statistics. I won't go through much of this. It's a pretty comprehensive list. I don't love the way it reads, but if I just wanted to go in and look at sites and buildings, it'll take me to a map and I can start doing all kinds of searches and things like that. So I think it's just useful to kind of get a sense of how our main organizer of economic development is kind of marketing the community in which you live. So that's all I wanted to show you there. But just if you have time to sort of look at that, I would strongly encourage you to. Then I hope I'm making everyone a little dizzy with my share screen. I've done better than I thought I would. So Team Kentucky, they are the ones who sort of are the gatekeeper for all possible leads coming in the state. Then there's the Kentucky Association for Economic Development. We are really strong partners with KAED. They are essentially charged with providing education to anybody who's working in the field of economic development in Kentucky. And we'll talk about this just a little bit later, but we help coordinate trainings for KAD for both kind of introductions to economic development as well as more advanced trainings. So we have a couple of agents each year who participate in the trainings and are members. It's not an inexpensive membership. CEDIK has provided scholarships, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Then there is the state Kentucky Chamber, and which is fairly different than a local chamber. They are more of an advocacy group designed to be pro-business and speak on behalf of industry in most instances. So you'll see they will have a very, most times they'll have a stance that's, anti-bargaining, so, against unions, pro lower taxes, things along those lines. But they're mostly advocacy, although they've started going into some other areas. Utilities are really big players in economic development because the more consumers they have, the better off they are. So they really want to have industry come in. They really want their population base to grow. And so they do dedicate a lot of resources to acting as a full economic development entity. Banks are huge. Technical assistance providers. So CEDIK would probably fall in the realm of a TA provider or an education provider. Lots of folks out there trying to help do feasibility studies, needs assessments, strategic planning. You've heard of Mountain Association, we'll think of KSBDC, the Small Business Development Center. I didn't mention universities on here, I should. And then finally, local chambers of commerce, which I'm guessing a lot of you have good working relationships with. They are there to support largely those secondary jobs, because assuming that there's an economic development entity in that community, that's how they typically will delineate the work. So I just want to look at the time here. I want to talk about economic development strategies so that you understand that economic development is not just about attraction, and that there are ways we can participate to sort of bring up the other types of strategies we don't often see. So there are 3 strategies: business attraction, business retention and expansion, and business creation. There's really nothing else, but these are big buckets, and so they can be attacked in different ways, but it's really simple. You're either out there trying to bring business in, you're trying to grow and retain the business that you have, or you're trying to start new businesses. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can see the chat box. So the question is, and I'll put this in here, what do you think, what are the primary factors that drive or that industry is attracted to in a community? So if you were in charge of marketing your community to potential industry, what do you think they care the most about? So put that in the chat box if you can. Quality health. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, school system, education, water, excellent. Arts and entertainment, workforce, access to roads, yep. Workforce, sports, workforce, quality of life, houses, yep. Reliable labor. This is great. Let's keep putting them in there so we can see what everybody says. So there is the, there is sort of the 2 sides to the story. And the one side is that economic developers will typically sell a place based on its available property, its financial incentives, its low cost of doing business, and I'm trying to think of what else, and and workforce. But workforce is often a limitation, and so there's only so much they can sell. Everywhere there's a workforce shortage. This was years ago, but when we went and asked, we did a really extensive survey with the fastest growing manufacturers in the country. And we were asking them, what are the types of factors that you're thinking about when you are moving or relocating or expanding to a community? What are you looking for? And their first one was high skilled labor. This idea of we have cheap labor, we unskilled labor, like people don't want that, right? They want to have a labor supply that they can train. They don't have to be skilled in that particular area, but they have to be skillable. So workforce is just number one. Back in the day, it was broadband was number two. Now there's an expectation that broadband is available, and you would already be eliminated from the selection process if you don't. The third one was healthcare. Really critical that there was available healthcare. When firms are moving, they're bringing workforce with them, or they're planning to have workforce, and they want to make sure that their workers are healthy. If their workers aren't healthy, then they're not productive. Then we get into things about education, housing, and I think Anne said that, and yeah, I saw Anne say that. Housing has become one of the biggest sticking points in economic development, almost anywhere. It could be urban, rural, suburban, that we have over time, we have overbuilt housing for high income folks and overbuilt housing for low income folks, and we have forgotten the middle. And so when we're thinking about trying to get in, industries, or we're trying to provide housing for our school teachers, our police officers who make between $30,000 or $50,000, housing isn't to be had. And so it's created a really big problem across the United States. So, the idea of providing incentives has always sort of stymied academics, because Kentucky say, oh, we have these great incentives. Well, I can promise you right next door in Tennessee, they do as well. And so we're all just sort of competing against each other and bidding up what we're giving to the firm. And the best example of this was when Amazon, if you guys remember this, if you didn't see this happening beforehand, hopefully you weren't surprised when it was over, but when Amazon was looking for their new site, and I don't know if any of your communities tried to get into the play of it, but people were offering like everyone's first child, I think, to be cheap child labor for Amazon, and they would do this, they would build this, they give them this money, they give them this land, these tax breaks, and everyone. And so what happened is that everyone's bids kept increasing. Well, at the end of the day, they ended up going to the two places that we already knew they were going because of existing relationships, right? They wanted to go to Crystal City, DC, or Virginia, and up, I guess, in Long Island. I think it was Long Island, or somewhere up northeast, where Jeff, what's his last name? Rich Jeff Bezos, right? Jeff Bezos, where he has family relationships. Well, I mean, they did that. And so at the end of the day, what happened is that those two cities who won ended up having to pay so much more to get them because they were competing with these other places. At the end of the day, Crystal City said, no, thank you. We do not want you. You're going to increase our housing prices. You're going to crazy up the transportation. So no. So they ended up only picking one location. But when we do these financial incentives, we think we're like creating this like amazing opportunity, but all we're doing is competing with our neighbor. And what those firms that we really want to come into our community because they bring high quality jobs, they're invested in place, they're a part of the community, they are going to go to a place where they see high amenities, they see investment in education, healthcare, workforce, all that good stuff. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But you will never, ever get an economic developer to say, oh, incentives aren't important. They just won't say it. They strongly believe it's a deciding factor. Okay, so thank you all for Bezos. Thank you, Ryan. All right, so let me keep going here. We are, all right, from current slide. All right, so the reality is that in Kentucky and nationwide, we have a huge percentage of our industry that are small and small to medium enterprises. And these are typically not the type of industry that we're trying to recruit in. We want to recruit in the big splashies. We got 200 jobs, 600 jobs. But the reality is that it's a very small portion of the number of establishments available or around. And so I think this one is for Kentucky. And this just shows sort of the distribution of the size of establishments over time. It is very stable. You will see typically during recessions, a little bit of a boost in the, a decline in the smalls as, those who could not make it are gone. But for the most part, it looks just like this, very, very stable. When we look at the percentage, this is a little bit easier to read. You can see that small businesses, which range between 2 to 9 employees, so really very baby, represent a giant percentage of our establishments. That number has increased just a little bit, but very stable. When you look at it as the percentage of total jobs, just by sheer definition, it's going to drop down a little bit, but the largest share of jobs comes from small, medium size, and that goes from 10 to 99 employees. Okay, so when I look at this as someone who works in economic development, I think, oh my goodness, what are we doing to take care of my green bars and my, I don't know what color that is. Let's just go with red bars, rouge. This is who I want to focus on, right? Is I want to make sure that my green and my rouge are doing well. I'll give attention to yellow for sure. But if I'm ignoring these 2 bars, I'm going to lose a huge chunk of my economy. This is something I show almost all elected officials, because what it does is it breaks down job gain and job loss by strategy. And so we spend a lot of our energy on this itty bitty slice right here, this little orangey, rougey slice. This move-in is saying that 0.4% of the job gain and from 2018 to 2019 was from industry moving in. But at that same time, even more left. I mean, it's a very small difference, but it's not like there's a huge net gain. So this idea of attraction, and this is for the state of Kentucky, this idea for attraction is pretty hard for me to justify, right? I mean, all this energy, and at the end of the day, I have a little bit less, I have, more people leaving than coming in, but it's still just a really small share. So I've got starts and I've got closures, and this will always be the case. People are entrepreneurs, they start something, that's when businesses have the highest rate of failures at the start time. But what I show folks is this little teal thing, is that the largest chunk of our job gain comes from working with existing industry. We had 20.6% of our job gain came from expansion, whereas only 6% declined from contraction. So overall, there's a net gain of about 14%. That is the job gain. And so for me, I show this to anyone who's working in economic development and say, tell me, explain to me why I'm putting all of my eggs in this little rouge slice. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And there are places where this rouge slice is ridiculous. Like, it's a really thin job gain and a huge move out because some big industry has left. It's just a little devastating to look at. So then we go to business retention and expansion, which is our second strategy. Look at the time. And to me, this is the most critical strategy around. The way you deploy the strategy varies. Within CEDIK, we have 2 different types of strategies around what we call, finally called BRE. We can either focus on the Main Street side of it and really get a community-centric model of supporting local businesses, predominantly around like a downtown or smaller area. Or we work kind of at the larger scale and work with economic developers and chambers to think, how do we support all of our businesses within our community? But essentially, and it's super easy, it's time consuming, but it pays off. And that is, I need to communicate with my existing industry and say, how are you? How can we help you? Those are the two questions that I think are, and they're super easy to ask. Sometimes we don't like the answers, but for one thing, it helps us to identify any red flags. So we could possibly identify businesses before they close. Or some other types of challenges that are just going to push a business kind of over the brink. But it also allows us to be proactive and come up with some strategies that can help sort of a community of businesses and not just one individual business. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The other part is business creation, right? So this is our third strategy. We can argue all day about the difference between entrepreneurship and small business development. Both are critical. Entrepreneurship is based on the idea of innovation, which leads to growth. Small business development isn't necessarily in and of itself a growth model. It's an employment model. We are always trying, if we had a choice, we'd want to go towards the more innovative model, but we want to do both. And so I'm going to show you a couple of programs that we have. We just started using Size Up Kentucky. I know Sarah has shared this a number of times, but this is a really great program, free of charge for any business or potential business to use. And I'll tell you a little bit about that success story for me. The Kentucky Innovation Network, which is out of the cabinet. And then you guys have gotten a lot of exposure to the KSBDC. All of those are designed to help businesses get to the next step. So here's my example for Size Up Kentucky. Again, it's, I think you can see, make sure you can see the website up there. But Size Up Kentucky is a great program that helps you literally size up how you're doing compared to your competition and potentially identify other suppliers or buyers of your product. And as my example, so in partnership with the Kentucky Association for Economic Development, we purchased a subscription to this. And so through numerous trainings, we would always talk about these coffee shops in Lexington. And I live in Jessamine County, right over the Fayette County line. And I went through this and there's just constantly this like hole of not having anything. And I knew there was a market for it. I can see like sort of the income and sort of average revenues for, coffee. And so this idiot, AKA me, is in the process of opening up a coffee and wine bar in Jessamine County solely because of this program. So just so you know, it has at least, I don't know if it's a success story. It's certainly a story that has led me to be in complete debt, but I'm hoping soon that will be over as soon as we open next month. But it's just a great tool to help businesses get their business plan ready and to explore, if you're working with a healthcare provider or and they want to say, oh, I could open up another office location. This is really good. Like if you, there's an orthodontist who said, I'm ready to expand. You can go through all these different things to figure out like where are the higher income households with kids between the ages of 13 and 18 that would be your likely candidate for braces, right? And so you can do all that and say, I know exactly where I'm going to put my business. So if you're ever have an opportunity to share this resource in your community, please do so. We're always happy to do additional trainings on this. I'm constantly learning. I don't know if we have anyone from out west. I'm going to look here to know a little bit about the Kentucky Innovation Station. This is just one example of how a community can support innovation, small business development. In general, it's kind of like an incubator incubator, has a maker space. Now all this is kind of on hold with COVID, but I think it's a cool model, and I don't think it's a terribly overwhelmingly expensive one. But it has like learning series and events. It has, back in the day it would have Innovate and Caffeinate. You could have things to play with maker spaces, and trainings to just drive innovation for people of all ages. So I'm almost done here, which is good. But I wanted to talk quickly about the role of extension in economic development. We don't have agents that have economic development responsibilities. We know that there's an expectation that all agents will do some CED, but it's not necessarily clear how you would accomplish that, or how you would be evaluated based on it. But I think what we saw when we did those community needs assessments, which it seems like it was just yesterday, but it's been about 2 years now, we saw 3 issues emerge. The first one was around economic development and workforce preparation. We did substance use and mental health and community vitality. So, we got 34,000 people to respond. This is what they said was important. And then through all their focus group, the focus groups you guys led and key informant interviews, it was important. And so all of us within Extension are trying to figure out how can we provide you all the tools to allow you to work in this space without distracting from, ensuring that you're able to get your other responsibilities. So specifically around economic development, there were a lot of requests for thinking about downtowns, tourism, and strategic planning for economic development, as opposed to sort of this let's just do economic development. So here are some things I thought would be potential roles for extension, and any other ideas are surely welcome. Obviously, we hear all the time, we are a land-grant university. We provide evidence-based research, and programming. So certainly providing research, providing the data, providing market analysis, just knowing that you have folks on campus who can help you with that. Communities can get sucked into spending a lot of resources on tools that are not useful or that don't reflect true conditions. And so where you can sort of be that intermediary and say, wait, we have access to better tools, more reliable tools, I think that's one way. The second is to lead programming, and that certainly would take the most amount of time and effort, but would be highly impactful. The third is to just be a facilitator. That's what Extension is so great about, is being able to facilitate new groups of people, and ensuring that our economic development groups are really all inclusive of those who would have an impact on the local economy, and to support planning. And I'm going to show you just a couple examples in a second. And then finally, I know a lot of you participate on boards where economic development is a strategy, whether it's the local chamber, the IDAs, Main Streets, tourism, whatever else that there might be. And I know you guys probably spend a ton of time doing that, and it's great to have Extension's voice on there. So this was, I'm getting ready after we're done with this conversation, this webinar, to go do some work in another county where I'm working with an economic development organization around strategic planning for their EDO. And it's as simple as doing a SWOT analysis. It's really understanding, what are your strengths and your weaknesses, and what kinds of opportunities are out there that we can try to maximize, and what are some of those threats that we have to consider in our strategies. And so this is for a fairly urban area, where they talk about, what it is they're really good at. And we'll take this information and we will just sort of regroup things and come up with some great strategies for them moving forward. All of that we are happy to facilitate for local communities. With the economic development organizations, we typically charge just a little bit of money, and they expect that. And then here's another one where we start prioritizing. We use, if you guys haven't seen this, if you haven't used Jamboard, I'm a big fan of Jamboard. It's a great way, particularly during COVID, to do the sticky dots and sticky notes. And so we do love to use that, and then be able to sort of put our sticky dots on there to figure out what is most important. Hopefully you all have been here. This is our CEDIK website. You can see some great, I'm sorry, it's such a light color up there, but you can see some great resources around downtowns that we've been working on. And then we have a growing CEDIK toolkit. And if there are other things that you think would be useful that we can add, please share with us. We're trying to be able to provide anything that isn't overwhelming, but would still be useful for you all. Hopefully you also have seen our profiles. This is one of the ways I think extension can be most useful is let's bring the data to the conversation so that we're having informed conversations. We have an economic data profile. We use the same data that the Cabinet for Economic Development uses. It is proprietary. We pay for it. The Cabinet pays for it. So I think it's important that communities know what the Cabinet has. And so we provide this. We do a profile on housing, which I mentioned earlier. It has become a really important issue for a lot of our communities across the country. And I'm coming to a close here. I feel like I'm talking fast. I can't see anyone right now. Hopefully there's someone there. But we have a couple of programs that we think are really useful, because CEDIK is, we are soft funded. And so we do charge for some of our programs. And that has never really been an issue. We are typically charging economic development organizations or communities that have the resources to do this work. And if they don't, then we still want to have that conversation because it's really important work. So first impressions, I know there was a webinar last month that Mercedes and Melissa led. This is by far the best program to get a conversation started. We did not create it. We are just grabbed a program the University of Wisconsin started, and it's just a great conversation starter. It's a secret shopper. I was in a community yesterday, and I said, they said, oh, we want to attract remote workers, given this, given COVID and people are kind of fleeing the urban areas. We want to attract, workers. And I said, well, you guys should do a first impressions program to see, what people are thinking. They're like, oh, we would be too scared to see the results. I said, well, then you definitely need to do it. Like that's a very scary response when they're too scared to see what those results say. Then we are not ready to be a place that welcomes in new visitors. We do have a community BRE. And then we also have, and I think it's on the next page, a statewide BRE program that's coming out. We have a community assessment, which is designed for economic development organizations that assesses the readiness of that community for economic development. It does a really good in-depth analysis of their local economy, looking at what types of interest they've gotten from other industry, how they compare to other areas. And then finally, we send in a team of economic development folks to do kind of a first impressions. And so that's a really great program. We've done that in a couple places, Muhlenberg County, Shelby County, and it has been really helpful. I just showed you the thing for Size Up. Create Bridges right now is across 13 counties in Eastern Kentucky, and it's a workforce program and a program designed for the retail tourism sector. And I think there's some information online about that. So our newest program that we've got coming out is in partnership with Blue Dot, and we have created a statewide CRM, which is a customer relationship management kind of communication platform. We have, it's going to be free to use for all communities, but there has to be someone who kind of owns it in each community where you have access to all of the businesses in your community, and where there is contact information, you can communicate with them. And when COVID hit and there was no way for us to reach out to restaurants, this would have done it. We would have reached out and said, how are you doing? When are you open? Are you doing curbside? Or if there was a manufacturer, a poultry plant, or what have you, and saying, how you doing? What kinds of issues are you facing? What can we do to help? So that is, we're currently demoing that in Lyon County and Mason County. And we'll be fully releasing that here in hopefully late spring, early summer, but it's a very exciting program. Last bit, I'm offering a course in the fall. It's a STOW course. I don't know what that stands for, but I think it's designed for extension. It's fully online. It's around local economic development, where we really dig more into, this was just a very, 30,000 foot level of economic development. And it's, but if you're, interested, by all means, it will be open. And then lastly, the Kentucky Institute for Economic Development runs each fall. CEDIK coordinates the program for KAED, and we lead a lot of the education for it. And we also provide scholarships for agents to participate. So those are the two things I wanted to mention. That's our contact information. I'm just so excited to get off the stop share so I can see if anyone's here. Woo! All right. Yay, Katie says we're here. So you guys are still here. That's wonderful. Hello, everybody. All right, so let me stop there and see what kinds of questions or comments or anything. We are just always trying to figure out new ways to be useful to you all. So let me know. You need a drink. Water. Any questions or thoughts? Anything you guys do in your local community that you want to share that you think would be great for others to hear about? I know we had a few on here who said they felt very familiar. So maybe talk a little bit about, some of the work that you're doing would be awesome. Sarah, can you twist arms?
I can't, because I'm not in any of those physical locations, but I can say that I'm very excited about this presentation. Will be on YouTube in case you feel like there's someone else that needs to see this information. Yeah, so I'll make sure to get that link out. But yes, maybe there's someone in your community that needs to hear some of what Alison shared. So yeah.
Awesome. I forgot about that.
We do have a couple chats.
Okay. So the certified trail town is great, right? Because you really need to bring all of your assets to the table. I was working in Johnson County yesterday, and they were talking about their Dawkins Trail. I can't remember if that's the name of it. And it goes across, it's a state linear park, and it goes across like 4 different counties. And there's a reason for all parties to be involved, right? You want people who are on that trail to find a reason to stop. And they are using it right now as a recruiting tool for people to move to their community. So I agree, Jeremy, very much that anything around public spaces, even though it doesn't sound exactly like economic development, is today economic development. And I've mentioned this in other places, but I was doing a presentation, and I was on a panel with this gentleman who was a site selector, and he said, that, and this, I wish I had like a camera on, because I wasn't prepared for him to say this, but he said, I'll tell you, when we take industry to a community, the first place they want to go is downtown. And if downtown is dead, the conversation's over. And I was like, well, oh my God, how did I miss this opportunity to tape this? So that's why all those players have to be together. Sandra said, yes, she's in Johnson County. It is the Dawkins Trail. I don't know how many counties that is. Is it like 4? I think it's like Magoffin, Johnson. I can't remember the other ones, but so many players are, thinking about how do we capitalize on this. Paula says the first impressions in Hickman County. Yes. And you guys did that virtually, right? Is that the one that you did? And it was not quite.
Yes, we had, and actually I think had to reschedule it twice maybe. But it was, for the most part, shared virtually this past year.
Okay.
So
awesome. Okay, well, and seriously, we are super, super open to any thoughts. You don't have to share them right now, but, definitely share them with Sarah or Melody or myself about ways that we can support you. as we, as we're coming out of COVID and these community priorities are kind of making their way back into the discussion again, and I know that's happening because we just met as program leaders. If there are ways that we can support you, do let us know. That's what we're here for. We just hired a new economic development specialist from Pulaski County, who used to work for the Economic Development Cabinet. So really versed in traditional economic development, but also was a part of the App Harvest deal, and it's got a great personality. So we've got resources here to support you. So just let us know what we can do. Okay. Well, with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of this rainy day. Maybe it's not raining where you are. And let us know how we can help you. Okay. All right. See you guys later.